Hi everyone, I'm Crusher, and this is an introduction and guide to a unique and interesting classic deck called Crusher Shaman. It's a deck with tempo and control elements, using big swings and strong removal to ultimately close the game out with an impenetrable wall of earth elementals, after which your opponent will simply have to concede. Back in Season 3, I took a version of this deck to Legend, and now, in the first full season of Hearthstone's Classic mode, I took this deck from Bronze 10 all the way to Legend. I peaked at Legend NA 183, and I maintained a 57.9% win rate using 5 slight variations on this deck, from Gold all the way through to Legend. This is my final and I think best build. The deck is built around two main combos, Injured Blade Master with Ancestral Healing, and Earth Elemental with Ancestral Spirit and/or Faceless Manipulator. The rest of the deck builds in lots of redundancies and synergies with these cards, while giving you the removal you need to be able to make it to the late game, where the deck can really shine. The early game combo in this deck is Injured Blade Master with Ancestral Healing, which gives you a 4/7 with Taunt for 3 mana as early as turn 2. This can grind aggro decks to a halt, or it can put pressure on control decks to spend removal that they would need later for your more expensive threats. The Injured Blade Master is useful even without Ancestral Healing though. It becomes a growing threat after a turn 2 Healing Totem, or it can become a Cairn Bloodhoof with Ancestral Spirit. Remember that when it's destroyed, it comes back as a 4/7 without the battle cry. Ancestral Healing is the modest hero of this deck. With many high health minions, there will be plenty of other healing targets, especially when you are about to copy that minion with Faceless Manipulator. It can also generate an emergency taunt to buy a turn against aggro, or block a game-ending Leroy Jenkins combo. Finally, it has sneaky synergy with the Black Knight, where it can give an enemy minion taunt and then remove it with TBK. Effectively, it's a Chillwind Yeti and Assassinate combo at a 3 mana discount. The late game combo for this deck is Earth Elemental with Ancestral Spirit and/or Faceless Manipulator, creating a seemingly endless wall of threats that will often force your opponent to concede. For 7 or 10 mana and 3 Overload, you get 2 7/8 taunts. They are vulnerable to Big Game Hunter, the Black Knight, Sap, and some other hard removal, but eventually your opponent will run out of these and have to start making very inefficient trades. If a Spirited Earth Elemental survives, you can copy it with Faceless Manipulator for a game-ending play. With Farsight, you can even have the ability to play all 3 cards on the same turn for 9 to 10 mana and 3 Overload, and you get 4 7/8 taunts. Silence and hard removal are your main enemies, so your goal is to draw them out on lesser targets. Mana Tide Totem not only helps you find your combo pieces, but will often force a silence, especially if you can get it tucked behind one of the 6 taunts in the deck. An unanswered Mana Tide Totem that lets you draw 3 or more cards is often a win condition all on its own. Cairn Bloodhoof is also likely to eat a silence. The downhit of Cairn is supposed to be that he can be bypassed and ignored, but if they do, you can always use Ancestral Healing, Ancestral Spirit, and Faceless Manipulator to make him into something that's impossible to ignore and nearly immortal. Since your opponent is likely to have used their Big Game Hunter on an Earth Elemental already, we should be free to play Ragnaros the Fire Lord. He's an excellent target for Ancestral Spirit at 10 mana total, can be taunted with Ancestral Healing to block aggression, and is overwhelming when copied by Faceless Manipulator. We're going to need some tools to survive into the late game where these bigger threats shine, so we include some cheap removal spells and sweepers to handle aggro. We have no healing, so we need to address enemy minions quickly. Earthshock and Lightning Bolt let you remove priority 1 and 2 drops before they deal too much damage. Earthshock has extra utility against mid-range and control decks to neutralize powerful buffs or death rattles like Cairn, Sylvanas, Ancient of War, or even a spirited minion they might copy from you with Faceless Manipulator. They one-shot Twilight Drakes, swinging the handlock matchup well in your favor. Lightning Bolt is one of your few sources of reach. Both your 1 mana removal spells can be buffed by Spell Power Totem, Blood Mage Thalnos, or in a pinch, Wild Pyromancer. Now, Lightning Storm may not be the most reliable sweeper, but it is critical for beating swarming aggression like Zoo. Blood Mage Thalnos, Spell Power Totem, and Wild Pyromancer give it extra heft, and with them, it can be used to clear out concealed minions like Miracle Rogue. It's also helpful to have more than one sweeper, so Wild Pyromancer fills that role using all the cheap spells we are running. You can even squeeze out extra procs by using Ancestral Healing and Ancestral Spirit when we need to. He's especially useful when you need a tempo over card value and has good synergy with Healing Totem. Against control decks, we are going to need some hard removal, and fortunately, Shaman has access to one of the strongest in the game. That was eventually nerfed for good reason: Hex. It also effectively silences, which is great for big minions with troubling death rattles like Karin, or dealing with spirited minions your opponent copied with Faceless Manipulator. Figure out which targets you will need to hex early in the match, and when possible land them on the highest priority targets. Farsight, Manatide Totem, and Blood Mage Thalnos give us the draw we need to find our combo pieces. Finally, we fill out our curve with some solidly statted minions. Sen'jin Shieldmaster fills the otherwise empty 4 slot with a taunt that aids our survivability and can be copied in a pinch against aggro. Fire Elemental beefs up our 6 slot with removal attached to a threatening body that makes a good spirit and faceless target if it survives. He's also the last of your reach for an extra 3 damage. The game plan and mulligans vary greatly from matchup to matchup, so I recommend you watch some of my stream or replays to get a sense for the strategy. But generally, you're always trying to find the injured Blade Master and Ancestral Healing combo early. Shield Master's best time to shine is on 4, so that's another good keep usually. Against aggro, you'll want your sweepers and cheap removal, and against control decks, you might be inclined to keep a threat that lines up particularly well against their options, or a hard counter to one of their own threats. Keeping some draw can be strong in matchups with little pressure in the first 3 turns. I found that the strongest matchups for this deck are some of the most popular ones on ladder, like Rogue, Druid, Handlock, and Mage, all of which were 63% or higher win rates on my climb. The only truly bad matchup was Midrange Shaman, and Hunter was the only one that was under 50%. But that one was fairly close and could probably be texted against if you need to. This is a fun, but also competitive deck with a unique playstyle and a great way to shake up the classic Hearthstone experience. It has the ability to quickly overwhelm an opponent by turn 8 if you hit your combos early, or it can win the game late into fatigue against a control deck. Give it a shot, tell us how it goes in the comments, and watch more gameplay to get a better sense for how it goes. Good luck, and enjoy having your opponents concede one right after another.